Here are 20 world records even doctors can't explain. The waistline. Because the story of Diana Ringo is honestly rather horrifying, not that she'll ever admit to it at all. The Navy wife, who was once in the Navy herself, began wearing her waist-shrinking garments in 2015. She said that she had lost her natural curves following the birth of twin boys and was desperate to do something about it. And to be fair, pregnancy can do a lot to a woman's body, and so wanting to get back what they lost is an understandable desire to an extent. Diana has over 45 corsets in her wardrobe, costing more than 1,400 pounds, all to help her maintain her teeny 18-inch waist and hourglass figure. Think about that for a moment as you look at her frame. It's not really all that healthy at all. Although Diana's partner, Brett, had initial concerns with her strict corset training, he eventually came to terms with his new wife's image and her way of life, and even still has some reservations. By Diana's own admission, many outside of her immediate family worry about her, and even think that her new waistline's going to kill her. It honestly might, because the body isn't really meant to be like that. Having a small waist, well, sure, you can do that and still be healthy, but she has to wear the corsets in order to maintain the figure, and that proves just how unhealthy it can be. Let's talk about Pixie Fox. This model had 6 of her ribs removed as the latest in a string of 200 operations to look like a cartoon character. She now has a world record for the most surgeries in pursuit of trying to look like somebody else, and therapists just can't figure out what's driven her to do this. This is a world record even doctors can't explain. Doctors know Pixie must be suffering from something akin to plastic surgery addiction. What they can't understand is how somebody comes to be addicted to such a thing. Some surgeons have even refused to operate on her due to their concerns. Their opinion is understandable. She's had some extreme surgeries, which includes using her pubic hair in an eyelash transplant. Yes, really. The oldest person. Now we'll take a look at a record that's not unhealthy, but it does boggle the minds of some doctors. After all, many people will have you to believe that the human lifespan only reaches certain levels, yet time and again there are unique people who are able to go beyond the average lifespan and into near uncharted territory. Enter the now late Kane Tanaka, a Japanese woman who was 119 years old when she passed away in April. The average life expectancy of a woman in the world was raised to 79 in the year 2021. And that meant that Tanaka went 40 years over the average. What a woman. Guinness World Records said that they were saddened to hear of Tanaka's passing and said that the news of her death had been confirmed by senior gerontology consultant Robert Young, who also helped to confirm her record as the oldest person alive in 2019. So, at the very least, she was able to hold on to that record for a few years before she passed on. Born in 1903, Tanaka married a rice shop owner at the age of 19 and worked in the family store until she was 103 years old. Longest tongue. If someone were to tell you that they have the gift of tongue, you may assume that they're giving a pun about how they're a linguist, or perhaps they can come up with something and spit it out at the drop of a hat. But for one man, he literally has the gift of tongue because he has the longest tongue in the world. And what's more, he knows how to use it. K. Praveen is from India, and he made the India Book of Records for having the longest tongue, measuring 4.25 inches. You might not think that that's very long. However, when he sticks his tongue out of his mouth, he makes it very clear just how long it is. Not only can he touch his nose with his tongue, but he can nearly touch his eyeball with it. He's practicing hard to be able to touch his eyelids with his tongue, and can effortlessly touch the side of his nose and elbow with his extra large tongue. Through practice, he can hide his tongue in his nasal cavity and calls the prank the invisible tongue. He can even use the tongue like a brush to draw and write letters. Like I said, the gift of tongue, it's definitely an odd world record, but as the saying goes, use what your mama gave you. And if anything, this proves that he's fine with his long tongue. Some might be a bit mortified at having such a long feature on their body, but Praveen seems fine with it all. Longest plank. But how about the world record for the longest time in the abdominal plank position? Is that one that you feel you would measure up to in feats of human power? It should, because when Dana Glowacki did it, she held that plank form for a whopping 4 hours, 19 minutes, and 55 seconds. Achieving the record at the first International Plank Training Conference in May of 2019, she captured the minds of everyone because most people can't even hold a 1-minute plank, let alone one that lasts for more than 4 hours. Now that I think about it, it sounds not only like a lot of work, but also a lot of pain. I'll take the high road and just let the dedicated people like her take the win for the rest of humanity. Oh, and if you can't tell by the pictures, she's worked really hard to get to the state that she needed to be in to be there. Her trainer was a former Marine, and we know how tough they can be. Plus, she had to learn various techniques to try and ease the pain on her muscles, all so that she could last that long. It's a physical power and a brain power, both in action. Now, it is cool that she went that long without destroying her body. Doctors would likely never recommend that anyone do this, but sometimes you just gotta go for the gold. Biggest mouth. If someone tells you you have a big mouth, it's because you talk too much, or perhaps you talk at the wrong point in time and spoil everything. It's not really the best quality. However, if you're a person who has a literal big mouth, you might be able to get a world record, though it's one that's highly contested. Isaac Johnson of Minnesota had originally won the title for the largest male mouth gape in 2019 when he stretched his mouth 3.67 inches. However, Philip Angus of Pennsylvania outstretched the boy with a mouth gape that measured 3.75 inches. Then in 2020, Isaac would reclaim the title when he opened his mouth 4 inches, and 2 years later went on to break the record a third time on the set of a television show in Milan, Italy, with an astonishing mouth gape of 4.014 inches. That's right, he beat his own world record to get an even better world record. What a world we live in. Just to give you some context on what he can do, he was able to put a can of Pringles in his mouth, as well as a can of Coca-Cola and 4 McDonald's cheeseburgers, which he can fit into his mouth wide open. Can head. Sometimes the human body has things happen to it, and within it, that doctors and scientists alike cannot explain. Phenomenon that boggle the mind and will seem fake to all of us, but is entirely real and is very perplexing. For example, we have one man known as Canhead. That's the nickname for the record. He's known by that name because for whatever reason, the skin on his body has incredible suction qualities, to the extent that he can stick cans of soda to his head without any effort at all. In fact, earlier this year, he got back the world record for cans on a head by putting 10 upon it. There's a video showing this, as you are seeing now. Part of the record is not only allowing the cans to stick to your head, but to keep them there for a certain amount of time. After all, on a regular person, gravity would take effect and bring the cans down, but not for Jamie Keaton. He has all of those things stuck on him for as long as he likes. Keaton, who turned his ability to stick objects to his head into a lucrative career, attributed his unusual skills to a medical condition. In fact, he notes that this condition is so rare that it doesn't even have a name attached to it. The pores on his skin, for whatever reason, suck in oxygen, and as a result, things like the bottoms of soda cans can remain in place as it seals itself to the skin. He didn't even realize the ability he had until he went to a baseball game after he'd shaved his head and stuck a can of soda to it while he was trying to cool down. That accident would turn into a new life for him, and the rest is history. Restraining motorcycles. For the record, I'm pretty sure that I saw something like this in a horror movie once. It didn't end well for that person, yet somehow it went much better here. Franz Moliner was doing a strength record attempt in Italy that will definitely make your eyes go wide. That's because his record was all about holding on to motorcycles as they pulled on him. Given that motorcycles are powerful mechanical beasts, it would be like a true feat of strength to hold them back. But it wasn't that he was holding them back while he was standing up. Oh no, it's a whole lot crazier and more stupid than that. Because just like the horror movie that I talked about, he had 4 motorcycles attached to ropes, which were attached to his arms and legs, and he got them to pull his limbs in 4 different directions. But wouldn't that pull him apart, you may be asking? Well, the answer is yes, if he was a much weaker man. However, his strength and endurance would allow him to push through the pain and get the record. He was even standing with the hosts of the show right after, and he was fine. Plus, he had a headset on to let them know that he was done and couldn't take any more. In all, he lasted for 24 seconds before having to stop, which is about 23.9 seconds longer than I would have lasted, so props to him. To be clear here, this is something that could have gone horribly wrong, so you should never push your luck by trying to do this yourself. Most muscle-ups. Muscle-ups are a top-tier body weight move that can take weeks or even months of training to master. CrossFitter and former gymnastics champion David Durante has even described them as the highest-level version of any pull out there, with perfect technique required. In other words, that's not something that I could do, and likely many of you out there cannot do it either. However, one athlete from Belarus would set a Guinness World Record for the most consecutive muscle-ups in the male category back in March of 2018 when he performed 26 clean reps in a minute and a half. And then he broke his own record, improving upon his own performance with 32 reps in 2 minutes and 46 seconds. That's a whole lot of skill, and as you watch him go in the video, you can see just how precise he is and the effort that it takes to do one muscle up. So going from that to dozens in under a few minutes, it takes real skill right there. Athletes like him sometimes don't get the credit they deserve in terms of their pure athletic ability. Most people simply look at them in terms of strength or speed, but they can do so much more with their muscles than just what you can see here. Submerged in ice. Speaking of athletes, you may have heard of the process known as an ice bath, wherein athletes will go into water full of ice in order to get their muscles to heal quickly so that they can get back to work much faster. It's a proven process, and LeBron James took this to the next level by doing a cryo shower to heal after ball games. But the difference between those guys and the next man that I'm talking about is that those athletes will be in ice for a couple of minutes. Valerian Romanovsky climbed into a glass tank of ice on a street and stayed in there for 3 hours and 28 minutes. He stayed in ice for hours and was able to do it without seriously destroying himself. Now, I'll be fair, he did prepare for it. The endurance enthusiast said that he trained for the record for 6 months, and he documented how he was able to use the cold by the time that he'd gotten into the tank. He focused hard on his training to make sure that his body was prepared for the effects of the ice. Now, in case you forgot, if your body reaches a certain temperature in the cold, you'll go into hypothermia, and then you'll slowly fade away as your body functions shut down. And for him to last hours in the ice with minimal clothing to protect him is truly a feat of great endurance. But again, this is a feat that he trained for, so please don't do this at home. Hypothermia is no joke, and this man has set the endurance record in the past. The tallest man. Well, here's one that I honestly have answers for from doctors, but back then it wasn't very well known. Robert Wadlow is the man who to this day holds the record as being the world's tallest man. When he last measured on June the 27th of 1940, the mild-mannered American stretched a staggering 8 feet and 11 inches tall. That's well over a foot above some of even the tallest NBA players ever. The man could slam dunk if he wanted to, but you wouldn't have guessed that Robert would have been a giant when he was born. He was an average-sized baby, and his life was basic up until about the age of 5. That's when his growth began to happen. He shot up over 5 feet by that time, and then when he was 17 years old, he was actually over 8 feet tall and the tallest teenager ever. By the time that he finally stopped growing, he was the biggest person that anyone had ever seen by a wide margin. Doctors would examine Robert and realize that his exceptional size was actually caused by hyperplasia of his pituitary gland. The gland is what regulates how tall that we're meant to be, because he never got treatment for it and kept on growing until he couldn't anymore. There are people who suffer from such things even today, and thankfully there are treatments to help them to regulate it. Pulling a plane. So now think about a strong man pulling a plane, because it has happened. In fact, a Lutheran pastor by the name of Reverend Kevin Fast is a strongman competitor who successfully pulled a CC-177 plane at CFB Trenton, setting a Guinness World Record for the heaviest aircraft pulled by an individual. The plane weighed 416,299 pounds and was pulled a distance of 8.8 meters in 1 minute and 16 seconds. Not only did he pull the plane, but he pulled it with incredible speed, which is great ability right there. He was rather modest about it all after setting the record, which shows you that sometimes you get a really good person setting a record that they earned. Longest nails. But for one woman, her combined nail length is going to blow your mind and possibly horrify you. Diana Armstrong has the record for the longest fingernails on a pair of hands female, as well as the longest fingernails on a pair of hands ever female. Both of the 63-year-old's hands have a combined nail length of 42 feet, 10.4 inches. She's been growing them for 25 years, and if not obvious, a doctor would not recommend it, and yet Diana lives with them every single day. And if you're ever wondering what would drive someone to do such a thing, well, she lost her daughter when she was just 16 years old, and it was her daughter that did her nails, so by growing them out, she feels closer to her. Shortest woman. Remember when I was talking about the pituitary gland and the issues that it can cause? Well, such conditions don't only work in making people really tall, they also work in making them really short. This person is the shortest woman in the world because she measures a staggeringly low 2 feet tall. She's almost 30 now and has never reached above that mark. Her bones have a condition in them which prevent them from growing beyond a certain limit, and she was doing fine until about the age of 5, and that's when she never grew taller. Getting the record, though, did help her to feel good about herself, so that's a nice cap on her story. Climbing steps with a person. Balance is something that many people lack, not only in terms of internal balance, but the balance of not being such a klutz. However, when you meet someone like the Giorna brothers and they do balancing acts that defied logic, physics, gravity, and a bunch of other stuff I won't mention, well, what they did was to climb up 100 steps in 53 seconds together. It may sound basic, except that one brother was on top of the other brother and balancing on the brother's head. The balance that it takes to do this is extraordinary, as well as the faith that it takes to trust your brother enough to both not fall and to keep you upright. Notice how they're not holding hands as they do this? The act is all about balancing, and definitely not something to try with your sibling at home. Longest nose. A man from Turkey holds this record and has a nose that measures 3.46 inches. Yes, inches, which is a very long nose. And as you can see from the pictures, it's also quite impressive. In fact, it almost looks fake when you consider how big it is compared to the rest of his face, but yes, that is actually his real nose. He seems not to mind it though, as he's taking a picture of it for Guinness, so I'll take that one as a win. Mikel Lotito. Next up, we have a man who is a bit too comfortable with his world record ability. Mikel Lotito was a French man who had the ability to eat just about anything inedible. You know, materials like glass and metal and other things. Yes, he was a man who regularly ate inedible things, and doctors couldn't figure out how he was able to do that without dying. And to be clear, this was not some kind of sleight of hand. He did a lot of these feats in front of people, newspapers, and so on, and even claimed to have eaten an entire plane one part at a time. Oh, and the clincher? He actually died after a very long life of eating stuff like this, and it just goes to prove that sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction. Longest hair. Meet this woman from China whose hair was 18 feet and 5.54 inches long when last measured in 2004. She currently holds the record for the world's longest documented hair. And when you look at the pictures, you see just how long that it is, and you'll be amazed at the length that she was able to maintain. The key thing to note here is time. She was measured in 2004, but began to grow her hair long all the way back in 1973. That's 31 years of growth before she was measured. Clearly, she really likes her long locks and doesn't mind the effort it takes to maintain it, and I'm sure that you all love your perfectly standard length hair, don't you? 4-finger push-ups. This former weightlifter from India made a Guinness World Record for 4-finger push-ups with 2 arms by making 85 push-ups in 1 minute. To be clear, that means that he used just 2 fingers per hand and balanced his body and did the push-up. I am hurting just thinking about doing that. Push-ups are terrible. They burn your arms and they're not even moving that much, yet it feels like you're pushing a mountain with your arms. So to go from doing that with the full surface of your hands to just doing it with 2 fingers per hand and doing 85 of them in a single minute, that's not only talent, but it's also scary ability that I'm fine with not having. Not so perfectly timed triplets. When Kaylee Deshane went into labor with her triplets at 22 weeks, she was worried about how premature they would be. Although her first child was born shortly after her water broke on December 28th of 2019, the other 2 babies stayed put and doctors decided to delay their birth so that they could get a little stronger. 5 days later, and in an entirely new decade, Rowan and Declan would arrive. They're still triplets by the scientific definition. It's just that they were born in different decades, which is not something that you think about happening when it comes to birth. What's more, she would be told that the odds were low that her babies would survive long after the pregnancy, but all 3 are still alive many years later. This is what you would call a miracle, and proof that doctors don't know everything. Stretchiest skin. One last demo for you to partake in. Grab a little bit of your cheek and pull it as far as you think it'll go. It can't really go that far, and that's because the elasticity of your skin has a limit that you can't exceed without injuries. But for Gary Turner, he can stretch the skin on his abdomen an amazing 6.25 inches. That's a record, and while he can't stretch the skin on his face that much, it's still well beyond what people are supposed to do. Turner is able to stretch his skin to such an extent because of a rare medical condition called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. So instead of his skin having a limit to its elasticity, it actually reverses the effect and makes it more loose. It almost means that his joints are much more flexible than they should be.